I trusted her with my life, and she was slowly taking it away from me. Every night, the woman I loved handed me death disguised as devotion, and I swallowed it with a smile, believing her lies, her gentle touch, her whispered promises of forever. But the truth was buried beneath those innocent-looking pills, a truth so dark, it would shatter everything I thought I knew about love, marriage, and the person sleeping beside me. What happens when the hand that feeds you is the same hand planning your funeral? Welcome to TJ's story, where we uncover the secrets people hide in plain sight, the betrayals that happen behind closed doors, and the shocking truths that change lives forever. If you're new here, subscribe and stay till the end, because this story will leave you questioning everyone you trust. Daniel Okonkwo was the kind of man who believed in simple things: hard work, honesty, family, love. At 34, he had built a modest but respectable life. He managed a logistics company in Lagos, woke up at 5 a.m. every day, and came home each evening to the woman he adored, Clara, his wife of 3 years. Clara was beautiful in a quiet, understated way. She had warm brown eyes that seemed to hold oceans of kindness, a soft voice that could calm any storm, and a smile that made Daniel feel like the luckiest man alive. She didn't ask for much. She didn't complain about his long hours or the cramped apartment they lived in while saving for their dream house. She simply loved him, supported him, and made their home a sanctuary. Or so he thought. It started innocently enough. About 2 years into their marriage, Clara began a new evening ritual. Every night, just before bed, she would bring Daniel a glass of water and 2 small white pills. "Vitamins, my love," she'd say sweetly, placing them in his palm. "You work so hard, your body needs support. These will help you sleep better and recover faster." Daniel never questioned it. Why would he? Clara worked as a nurse at a private clinic. She understood health and wellness far better than he did. If she said he needed vitamins, then he needed vitamins. So he took them. Every single night. At first, the effects seemed positive. He slept deeply, sometimes too deeply. He'd wake up feeling groggy, but Clara assured him it was just his body adjusting. "You're exhausted, Daniel. Your system is catching up on years of poor sleep." He believed her. Weeks turned into months. The pills became as routine as brushing his teeth. Clara would hand them over with that loving smile, watch him swallow, kiss his forehead, and whisper, "Good night, my king." But slowly, something began to change. Daniel started noticing gaps in his memory. Small things at first, forgetting where he'd placed his keys, missing appointments he could have sworn he'd remembered. Then bigger things. Entire conversations with colleagues that he had no recollection of. Moments during the day where he'd suddenly feel disoriented, as if waking from a dream he couldn't quite remember. The dizziness came next. It would hit him without warning, standing up too fast, driving home from work, even sitting at his desk. The world would tilt slightly, and he'd have to grip something solid to steady himself. He mentioned it to Clara once. "It's stress, baby," she said, rubbing his shoulders with practiced care. "You're overworking yourself. That's why I make sure you take your vitamins. You need rest." Rest. That word haunted him because rest was all he seemed to do lately. The deep, dreamless sleep that swallowed him whole the moment his head hit the pillow. Sleep so heavy that sometimes he'd wake up in the exact same position he'd fallen asleep in, as if his body hadn't moved a single inch all night. It wasn't normal. But Daniel trusted Clara. He loved her. And love, he believed, meant trust without question. Until one Friday night, when everything shifted. Daniel had come home late, exhausted from a particularly brutal day. A shipment had been delayed, clients were furious, and he'd spent hours putting out fires. All he wanted was to collapse into bed and forget the world existed. Clara greeted him at the door with her usual warmth, but there was something different in her eyes. A flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Anticipation, anxiety. "Long day?" she asked, leading him to the dining table where she'd prepared his favorite meal. Jollof rice, fried plantains, and grilled chicken. "The longest," Daniel sighed, sinking into his chair. I don't even know how I'm still standing." "Then eat, my love. You need your strength." She watched him eat with an intensity that felt odd, but Daniel was too tired to analyze it. He finished his meal, showered, and dragged himself to bed. And there she was, as always, holding the glass of water and the 2 white pills. "Your vitamins," Clara said softly. Daniel reached for them, but something made him pause. Maybe it was the exhaustion making him more aware. Maybe it was the strange look in Clara's eyes. Or maybe it was the way she stood there, perfectly still, watching him with a focus that felt less like love and more like waiting. "What's in these exactly?" Daniel asked, holding the pills up to the light. For just a split second, barely a heartbeat, Clara's expression faltered. "Just vitamins, Daniel. Multivitamins, magnesium, and a mild herbal supplement for sleep. I've told you this before." Her voice was calm, but her fingers tightened around the glass of water. "Right," Daniel said slowly. I've been feeling off lately, really tired, and the memory gaps." "That's exactly why you need these," Clara interrupted gently, sitting beside him on the bed. "Your body is depleted, my love. You're running on empty. These help restore balance." She placed her hand on his cheek, her touch warm and familiar. "Do you trust me?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. "Of course I trust you," Daniel said. "Then take them, for me, for us." Daniel looked into her eyes, those warm, loving eyes, and swallowed the pills. Clara smiled, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Good night, my king." She turned off the light and settled beside him, her breathing slow and even. But Daniel didn't close his eyes. Because in that brief moment when Clara's expression had faltered, when her fingers had tightened on the glass, when she'd asked, "Do you trust me?" with just a little too much urgency, Daniel had felt something he'd never felt before in their marriage. Fear. And as he lay there in the darkness, pretending to drift off, feeling the familiar pull of drowsiness creeping through his limbs, one terrifying thought consumed his mind. What if the woman I love is poisoning me? The room blurred, his body grew heavy. And just before the pills dragged him into unconsciousness, Daniel made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow night, he wouldn't swallow the pills. Tomorrow night, he would see the truth. What would you do if you discovered the person you trusted most was slowly destroying you from the inside? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to know what Daniel discovers when he stays awake, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. This is TJ's story, where the truth is always darker than you think. The pills sat heavy in Daniel's mouth, dissolving slightly against his tongue. He had only seconds before Clara would notice, before she would ask if something was wrong, before everything unraveled. So he did what desperation demanded. He faked it. Daniel took a long sip of water, tilted his head back as if swallowing, and let the liquid slide down his throat while keeping the pills tucked against his cheek. He coughed once, naturally, then handed Clara the empty glass. "Thank you, my love," he murmured, his voice already taking on the drowsy quality she'd grown accustomed to hearing. Clara's shoulders relaxed. That's what confirmed it for Daniel, the visible relief in her posture, as if she'd been holding her breath, waiting for him to comply. She smiled and kissed his forehead. "Sleep well, my king." Daniel closed his eyes and regulated his breathing, making it slow and deep. Beside him, Clara settled into bed, but she didn't immediately relax. He could feel her watching him, could sense the weight of her gaze assessing whether he was truly asleep. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, she shifted. The mattress creaked softly as she turned away from him. Daniel kept his breathing steady, fighting every instinct to open his eyes. His heart hammered against his ribs so loudly he was certain she could hear it. The pills had begun dissolving in his mouth, leaving a bitter, chalky taste that made his stomach turn. He wanted to spit them out, to rinse his mouth, but he couldn't move. Not yet. Be patient, he told himself. Wait. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Clara's breathing had evened out, but Daniel knew better than to believe she was asleep. He'd lived with this woman for 3 years. He knew the sound of her actual sleep, the soft sighs, the occasional murmur. This was different. This was calculated stillness. She was waiting, too. At exactly 11:47 p.m., Clara moved. She slipped out of bed with practiced silence, her movements so careful that if Daniel had truly been drugged, he never would have noticed. She padded across the bedroom floor, avoiding the spots where the wood creaked, spots she'd clearly memorized. Daniel's pulse quickened. Through barely open eyelids, he watched her silhouette move through the darkness toward her side of the closet. She pulled out her phone, not the iPhone she used during the day, but a second phone he'd never seen before. A cheap Android with a cracked screen. His blood ran cold. Clara's fingers moved quickly across the screen, typing something. Then she lifted the phone to her ear, her back turned to the bed. "It's me," she whispered, her voice so low Daniel had to strain to hear it. "He's out. Yes, I'm sure. I gave him the full dose tonight. No, there's no risk. He trusts me completely." Daniel's entire world tilted. The woman he loved, the woman he'd built a life with, the woman he'd planned children with, was reporting his unconscious state to someone else like it was a mission objective. "Tomorrow night," Clara continued, her voice carrying an edge of tension. "I'll have everything ready by tomorrow night. Stop pressuring me, I know what I'm doing. The insurance policy goes into effect next week. We just need to wait a little longer." Insurance policy. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. "I have to go," Clara whispered abruptly. She ended the call and stood there for a moment, staring down at the phone in her hand. Even in the darkness, Daniel could see her shoulders trembling. Was it guilt, fear, anticipation? He would never know because a second later, Clara's demeanor shifted entirely. She straightened her spine, smoothed down her nightgown, and tucked the burner phone into a corner of the closet behind a stack of old shoe boxes. But she didn't come back to bed. Instead, she moved to the bedroom door, opened it silently, and slipped into the hallway. Daniel waited 10 agonizing seconds, then sat up. His body felt strange. There was a mild tingling in his fingers and a faint sense of disconnection, probably from whatever small amount of the pills had dissolved in his mouth. He quickly spat the remaining residue into his hand and wiped it on the inside of his pillowcase. He'd dispose of it properly later. Right now, he had to follow her. Daniel crept to the bedroom door and peered into the hallway. The apartment was dark except for a sliver of light coming from beneath the door to Clara's home office, a small room she'd claimed for herself when they moved in, saying she needed space to handle medical records and clinic paperwork. He'd never questioned it, never had reason to. Now, everything was a reason. Daniel moved silently down the hallway, his bare feet soundless against the cold tile. He could hear movement inside the office, drawers opening, papers rustling. What was she doing? He pressed himself against the wall beside the door and listened. More rustling, then the distinct sound of a lock clicking open. Daniel's mind raced. A lock. There was nothing in that office that required a lock, at least nothing he knew about. Carefully, moving with agonizing slowness, Daniel lowered himself to the floor and peered through the gap beneath the door. What he saw made his blood freeze. Clara was kneeling in front of the bottom drawer of her filing cabinet, a drawer he'd assumed held old tax documents and medical journals. But she'd removed a false bottom, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. From this secret space, she pulled out a manila folder bulging with papers, a small black notebook, and the burner phone she'd used earlier. But there was something else, something that made Daniel's breath catch in his throat. A syringe, and 3 small glass vials filled with clear liquid. Clara handled them with the casual familiarity of someone who'd done this many times before. She checked the labels on the vials, nodded to herself, then carefully placed them back in the hidden compartment along with everything except the folder and notebook. She stood, folder in hand, and moved toward the desk. Daniel scrambled backward just in time, pressing himself into the shadows of the hallway as the office door began to open. Clara emerged, folder tucked under her arm, and headed not toward the bedroom but toward the living room. Daniel followed at a distance, using the darkness and the layout of the apartment he knew by heart to stay hidden. She sat at the dining table and opened the folder under the dim light of her phone's flashlight. Daniel positioned himself behind the kitchen doorway where he could see without being seen. The first document she pulled out made his heart stop. It was a photocopy of his life insurance policy, the one his company had provided as part of his employment benefits, but there were handwritten notes in the margins, calculations, dates. The payout amount circled in red, 50 million. 50 million naira. Clara flipped to the next page, a copy of their marriage certificate with certain clauses highlighted, then bank statements showing his account balances, property documents for the small plot of land he'd inherited from his father. She'd documented everything he owned. She'd cataloged his entire life like inventory. The black notebook was worse. Clara opened it to a page marked with a yellow sticky note. Daniel squinted, trying to read her handwriting in the dim light. Dosage progression. Month 1-3, 5 mg nightly, established dependency. Month 4-8, 10 mg nightly, increased sedation, memory impairment. Month 9-12, 15 mg nightly, organ stress begins. Month 13+, 20 mg nightly, prepare for final phase. Estimated timeline to organ failure, 16-18 months. Estimated timeline to natural causes determination, high confidence. Final solution, if timeline inadequate, injection cardiac event simulation. Daniel's legs nearly gave out. She wasn't just drugging him. She was killing him, slowly, methodically, scientifically. And she'd been doing it for over a year. Clara flipped to another page, this one containing a detailed calendar. Dates were marked with check marks, presumably nights she'd successfully administered the pills. There were only 3 dates in the past year without check marks, all occasions when Daniel had been traveling for work. She'd never missed a single night when he was home. Never. The dining room suddenly felt too small, too airless. Daniel's vision blurred at the edges, and he had to grip the doorframe to keep from collapsing. His wife, the woman who kissed him goodnight, who made his favorite meals, who smiled at him with such apparent love, had been poisoning him for over a year with the clinical precision of an executioner. And she'd almost succeeded. According to her timeline, he had maybe 2 months left before the damage became irreversible, before his organs began failing, naturally, before he became another tragic statistic, a young man who worked too hard and died too soon. Clara's phone buzzed, pulling Daniel from his spiraling thoughts. She answered immediately. "I told you not to call me at home. I don't care, it's not safe. Fine, tomorrow, 2 p.m. the usual place. Yes, I'll bring everything. No, he doesn't suspect a thing. He's completely under control." She paused, listening. Then she said something that shattered the last piece of Daniel's heart. "I know it's taking longer than we planned, but we have to be patient. Once he's gone, we'll have everything. The insurance money, the property, all of it. Then you and I can finally be together without hiding. Just a little longer, my love, I promise." My love. She called someone else, my love. Clara ended the call and sat there for a long moment, staring at the documents spread before her. Then she did something unexpected. She started crying. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks as she gathered the papers and returned them to the folder. Her hands shook slightly as she wiped her eyes, and for just a moment she looked almost human, almost regretful. But then she steeled herself, took a deep breath, and whispered to the empty room. "I'm sorry, Daniel, but this is the only way." She stood, turned off her phone's flashlight, and headed back toward the office to hide the evidence of his planned murder. Daniel retreated silently to the bedroom, his mind reeling, his entire reality shattered. He climbed back into bed just moments before Clara returned. She slipped under the covers beside him, and even now, even knowing what he knew, she pressed a gentle kiss to his shoulder. "Sleep well, my king," she whispered into the darkness. Daniel lay there, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The woman beside him was a stranger. A beautiful, murderous stranger who'd infiltrated his life, won his trust, and systematically worked to end his existence. But now he knew. And knowledge, Daniel realized, was the only weapon he had. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Clara's handwriting in that black notebook. Final solution if timeline inadequate. Injection cardiac event simulation. He heard her voice on the phone, cold and calculated, discussing his death like a business transaction. He felt her kiss on his shoulder, a kiss that now felt like the mark of Judas. By the time dawn broke through the bedroom curtains, Daniel had made several decisions. First, he couldn't confront Clara. Not yet. She was clearly working with someone, and if he revealed what he knew too early, they might accelerate their plan. The syringe and vials in her hidden compartment proved she had a backup method if the slow poisoning didn't work fast enough. Second, he needed evidence. Real, undeniable, legal evidence that would not only save his life, but ensure Clara and her accomplice faced justice. Third, he had to continue pretending. The pills, the trust, the loving husband routine, all of it had to continue as if nothing had changed. It was the only way to buy himself time. Clara woke around 7 a.m., stretching languidly before turning to Daniel with that warm smile he now recognized as a mask. "Good morning, my love," she said, running her fingers through his hair. "How did you sleep?" The words tasted like ash in Daniel's mouth, but he forced a smile. "Like the dead," he said, the irony of the phrase not lost on him. If Clara noticed anything, she didn't show it. She kissed his forehead and got up to prepare breakfast, humming softly to herself as if she hadn't spent the previous night planning his murder. Daniel went through the motions of his morning routine, but his mind was elsewhere. As he showered, he mentally cataloged everything he'd need. Access to Clara's office, a way to photograph the documents, recordings of her phone conversations, and most importantly, samples of whatever drugs she was giving him for analysis. He also needed to find out who she was working with. The mysterious man on the phone, her apparent lover and co-conspirator. Who was he? How did they meet? How long had this been planned? Daniel dressed for work, but before leaving, he did something he'd never done before. He palmed his phone and pretended to forget it in the bedroom, placing it strategically on the nightstand with the voice recording app activated. "Forgot my phone," he announced to Clara, who was plating scrambled eggs in the kitchen. "It's on the nightstand, baby," she called back without looking up. But Daniel didn't retrieve it. Instead, he grabbed an old backup phone from his car, one he'd kept after upgrading last year, and went to work, leaving the recording device behind. If Clara made any calls from home, he'd have them on tape. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Daniel sat in his office, unable to focus on shipment manifests or client emails. His mind kept circling back to one question. How long had Clara been planning this? They'd met 4 years ago at a friend's wedding. Clara had been a guest on the bride's side, a quiet, beautiful woman who'd caught Daniel's eye across the reception hall. They'd talked for hours that night, discovering shared interests and an easy chemistry that felt almost too good to be true. Now he wondered, had it been too good to be true? Had she targeted him even then? Around 1:30 p.m., Daniel's backup phone buzzed with a notification. He'd set up a cloud sync for the recording app, and it had just captured something. His hands shook as he put in his earbuds and listened. Clara's voice came through clearly. "I'm leaving now. Yes, I have everything. Don't worry, he left for work like always. He doesn't suspect anything. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She was going to meet him, the accomplice, right now. Daniel's heart raced. This was his chance. He called his assistant. "Family emergency. I need to leave early. Cancel my afternoon meetings." "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked, concerned. "It will be," Daniel said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. He drove home at dangerous speeds, his mind creating and discarding a dozen plans. He couldn't follow Clara, she knew his car. But if he could get into her office while she was gone, if he could photograph those documents, copy that notebook. The apartment was empty when he arrived. Clara's car was gone, just as her phone conversation had indicated. Daniel didn't waste time. He went straight to her office and opened the filing cabinet. The top drawers were exactly as he'd always known them: medical journals, old tax returns, nothing interesting. The bottom drawer was locked. Of course it was. Clara had locked it again after retrieving the folder last night. Daniel searched frantically for the key, checking her desk drawers, under the desk mat, behind picture frames, all the obvious hiding spots. Nothing. Then he remembered. Clara always wore a small chain around her neck with a pendant he'd given her for their first anniversary. But beneath that pendant, there was often a second, smaller chain she thought he didn't notice. The key wasn't in the office. She kept it on her person. Daniel cursed under his breath. He needed a different approach. He pulled out his phone, the backup one, and called a locksmith, claiming he'd locked important documents in a filing cabinet and lost the key. The locksmith was reluctant to come without proof of ownership, but Daniel offered triple the usual fee for immediate service and no questions asked. Money, as always, talked. While waiting, Daniel searched the rest of the office more carefully. He found Clara's laptop in the desk drawer, but it was password protected. Her medical textbooks lined one shelf, and beneath them, he found something interesting: a burner phone box. Empty, but with a receipt dated 2 years ago, a year before their marriage. She'd been planning this for at least that long. The locksmith arrived within 40 minutes. Daniel met him at the door, paid cash up front, and led him to the office. "This is the one," Daniel said, pointing to the bottom drawer. The locksmith examined the lock, pulled out his tools, and had it open in less than 3 minutes. "Pleasure doing business," the man said, pocketing the cash and leaving without another word. Daniel knelt before the open drawer and removed the false bottom, his hands trembling. Everything was there. The manila folder, the black notebook, the vials, the syringe, and one more item he hadn't seen last night. A second folder, this one marked with a single word in Clara's handwriting. "Backup." Daniel opened it. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Photos of him and Clara together, at restaurants, on their honeymoon, at family gatherings. But these weren't sentimental keepsakes. Each photo had been annotated: dates, locations, lists of people who'd witnessed them together. She'd been building an alibi, documenting their happy marriage for when questions eventually arose about his death. There were also printed screenshots of social media, posts Clara had made about their relationship. Posts Daniel remembered seeing, thinking how lucky he was to have a wife who appreciated him publicly. Now he understood. She wasn't celebrating their marriage. She was creating a paper trail of the devoted wife who would be devastated by her husband's tragic, untimely death. The coldness of it, the calculated nature of every smile, every photo, every "I love you" post, made Daniel's stomach turn. But it was the last item in the backup folder that truly broke him. A photocopy of their marriage certificate with a handwritten note attached. Target secured. Estimated asset value, 65 M total. Timeline, 18-24 months. Insurance activation requires 12-month marriage minimum. Patience required. The note was dated 1 week after their wedding. Clara had married him with the explicit intention of killing him for money. Every moment of their 3-year marriage had been a lie. Every kiss, every intimate moment, every whispered, "I love you." All of it had been part of a long con that would end with his death. Daniel photographed everything, every page of the notebook, every document in both folders. The vials, he noted the labels. Benzodiazepine compound, custom formulation. The syringe. The marriage certificate with its damning note. He took videos too, showing the hidden compartment, the locked drawer, everything in context. Then he carefully replaced everything exactly as he'd found it, and locked the drawer with the locksmith's help before the man left. His phone showed it was now 3:45 p.m. Clara had been gone for over 2 hours. Where was she? As if summoning her with the thought, Daniel heard a car pull into the building's parking garage. He rushed out of the office, closed the door, and was sitting casually on the living room couch, scrolling through his backup phone when Clara walked in. She looked flushed, happy even. There was a glow to her skin that Daniel recognized from their early dating days. She'd been with him, the other man. "Daniel," Clara's eyes widened in surprise. "What are you doing home so early?" "Slow day at work," Daniel lied smoothly. "Finished everything by lunch and decided to come home to my beautiful wife." The smile that spread across Clara's face was genuine enough to be heartbreaking. "That's sweet," she said, setting down her purse and walking over to kiss him. "I just went to the market, thought I'd make your favorite for dinner." She smelled different, a cologne Daniel didn't recognize mixed with her usual perfume. She'd been with him, and now she was standing here, lying to Daniel's face with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. "That sounds perfect," Daniel said, pulling her into an embrace that felt like hugging a stranger. Clara hugged him back, then pulled away to start cooking. Daniel watched her move around the kitchen, chopping vegetables, seasoning meat, humming contentedly. She looked so normal, so domestic, so completely unlike a woman who'd spent the afternoon with her lover, plotting her husband's murder. That evening, they ate dinner together. Clara served him his favorite meal, and they talked about their days, her work at the clinic, lies, his work at the logistics company, truth, but it felt meaningless now, their plans for the weekend, hollow promises she'd never intended to keep. And that night, like clockwork, Clara brought him the pills. "Your vitamins, my love." Daniel looked at the white pills in her palm, these tiny, innocent-looking tablets that contained his slow death. For over a year, he'd swallowed them without question. For over a year, she'd been poisoning him with a smile. "Actually," Daniel said carefully, "I've been thinking. Maybe I should stop taking these for a while." Clara's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. The smile remained, but something hardened behind her eyes. "Why would you want to stop?" she asked, her voice still gentle but with an edge of steel beneath it. "I've just been feeling so tired lately. What if the vitamins are too strong? Maybe my body needs a break." "Daniel," Clara sat beside him, taking his hands in hers. "Your body is tired because you work too hard. These vitamins are helping you, not hurting you. Trust me, I'm a nurse. I know what you need." The way she emphasized, "Trust me," sent chills down his spine. "If you stop now," Clara continued, "all the benefits you've been building up will disappear. Your sleep will get worse. Your energy levels will crash. Please, baby, trust me. I only want what's best for you." She was good, so good. If Daniel hadn't seen the evidence with his own eyes, hadn't heard her coldly discussing his death on the phone, he might have believed her. Might have taken the pills and continued his unknowing march toward the grave. Instead, he smiled, squeezed her hand, and said, "You're right, I'm sorry, I do trust you." He took the pills from her palm and swallowed them with water, making sure she watched the entire process. Clara's shoulders relaxed. She kissed him deeply, a kiss that tasted like betrayal, and whispered, "I love you so much." "I love you too," Daniel said, the words physically painful to speak. That night, Daniel lay in bed, the pills once again hidden in his cheek, and listened to Clara's breathing beside him. Tomorrow, he would take the evidence he'd gathered to the police. Tomorrow, this nightmare would end. But tonight, he had to survive one more night with the woman who'd promised to love him until death did they part. She just hadn't mentioned that death would come much sooner than he'd expected. What would you do if you discovered every moment of your marriage was a calculated lie? If the person you loved had married you with one purpose, to kill you and take everything? Daniel's story is far from over. He has the evidence, but Clara is desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. The final confrontation is coming, and only one of them will survive. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Drop a comment and tell us, would you have noticed the signs? Have you ever trusted someone you shouldn't have? This is TJ's story, where we expose the darkness hiding behind closed doors. You won't want to miss what happens when Daniel finally makes his move. Stay safe, trust wisely, and remember, the person sleeping beside you might be someone you don't know at all. Daniel woke up Saturday morning with a clarity he hadn't felt in months. Maybe it was because he'd finally stopped taking the poison. Maybe it was because he now understood the enemy he was facing. Or maybe it was simply the relief of knowing the truth, no matter how devastating. He had a plan. But first, he needed to understand exactly what Clara had been giving him. At 9 a.m., while Clara was in the shower, Daniel retrieved one of the pills from the bottle she kept in the bathroom cabinet. He'd already photographed the label, unmarked, which meant Clara had custom-filled them herself. Probably at the clinic where she worked, where she had access to pharmaceutical supplies and the knowledge to cover her tracks. He wrapped the pill carefully in tissue and tucked it into his wallet. Then he replaced it with a supplement tablet from a bottle of vitamin B12 he'd bought on the way home yesterday. The pills were similar enough in size and color that Clara wouldn't notice the difference unless she examined them closely, which she had no reason to do. Daniel had replaced 5 pills total, enough to keep him safe while maintaining the appearance of compliance. "Morning, baby," Clara said, emerging from the bathroom in a towel, her hair wet and smelling of lavender shampoo. She looked so innocent, so genuinely happy to see him. It made Daniel sick. "Morning," he replied, keeping his tone light. "What do you want to do today? It's Saturday. We could go to the market, maybe catch a movie." Clara's smile faltered for just a moment. "Actually, I have to go into the clinic for a few hours. Emergency inventory check. You know how it is." Lies, all lies. She was meeting him, the accomplice. "That's fine," Daniel said easily. "I'll probably just watch football and catch up on sleep. I've been so exhausted lately." The concern that flashed across Clara's face might have seemed genuine to anyone else, but Daniel now recognized it for what it was. Worry that the poison wasn't working fast enough. "You have been looking tired," Clara said, sitting beside him on the bed. "Are you feeling okay? Any headaches, dizziness?" She was checking for symptoms, monitoring her victim's decline. "Nothing serious," Daniel lied. "Just need rest." "Make sure you take your vitamins tonight," Clara said, kissing his forehead. "They'll help." "They'll kill you," Daniel thought, but he smiled and nodded. The moment Clara left the apartment, Daniel was on the move. His first stop was a private laboratory on the mainland, one that advertised discreet testing services and didn't ask questions if you paid in cash. Daniel handed over the pill along with a generous fee. "I need a full chemical analysis," he said. "Everything that's in this tablet, and I need it by Monday." The lab technician, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes behind thick glasses, examined the pill carefully. "This looks pharmaceutical grade. Where did you get it?" "Does it matter?" Daniel asked, sliding more cash across the counter. The technician pocketed the money. "Monday afternoon. Come back around 3 p.m. Daniel's next stop was more difficult. The police. He'd spent all night debating whether to go to them now or wait until he had the lab results. But the evidence he'd already gathered was substantial. The photographs of Clara's murder notebook, the recordings of her phone conversations, the documentation of the insurance policy, and her timeline for his death. It should be enough. The problem was that Daniel didn't know who he could trust. Clara worked in healthcare, had connections, and was clearly intelligent enough to have planned this for years. What if she had a friend in the police force? What if reporting her now gave her the chance to destroy evidence or accelerate her plan? Daniel sat in his car outside the police station for 20 minutes, weighing his options. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello?" "Daniel Okonkwo," a man's voice, deep, unfamiliar. "Who's asking?" "Someone who knows what your wife is doing to you." Daniel's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "A friend, or at least someone who doesn't want to see you dead." The man paused. "You stopped taking the pills, didn't you? Smart move. But you need to be smarter, Clara knows. How? Daniel's heart hammered. How do you know any of this? Because I'm the one who told her it was a bad idea from the beginning. The man's voice carried a mixture of regret and urgency. My name is Michael. I work with Clara at the clinic, and I'm the one who's been trying to talk her out of this insanity for the past 6 months. Daniel's mind raced. Was this a trap? Another accomplice trying to gauge how much he knew? If you're trying to help her, why are you calling me? Because I'm not trying to help her anymore, Michael said firmly. I'm trying to stop her. What she's doing, what we planned, it's gone too far. I thought I could convince her to back out, but she's obsessed now. She won't stop. Daniel felt his grip tighten on the phone. You're the one she's been meeting. You're the accomplice. A heavy sigh. Yes, and I'm the one who's going to help you put her in prison before she actually kills you. Why should I trust you? Because if I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead, Michael said bluntly. I'm a pharmacist. I'm the one who formulated those pills. I could have made them strong enough to kill you in days instead of months. But I didn't. I kept stalling, kept making them weaker, hoping Clara would come to her senses. Daniel's hands shook. You've been poisoning me for over a year, and now you want credit for not making it worse. I want a chance to make this right, Michael said. And I want to warn you, Clara is planning to use the injection tonight. She's panicking because you suggested stopping the pills. She thinks you're suspicious. So tonight, she's going to put something in your dinner that will knock you out completely, and then she's going to inject you with potassium chloride. It'll look like a heart attack. Natural causes. You'll be dead before midnight. The world tilted. Tonight. She was going to kill him tonight. How do I know you're telling the truth? Daniel demanded. Check her purse when she gets home, Michael said. She picked up the potassium chloride from the clinic this morning. It'll be in a small vial with a blue label. And Daniel, don't eat anything she makes you tonight. Nothing, not even a glass of water. The line went dead. Daniel sat in his car, his entire body trembling. Was Michael telling the truth, or was this an elaborate setup to make him paranoid and reckless? He drove home in a daze, his mind spinning through possibilities and contingencies. When Clara returned around 4 p.m., she was in an unusually good mood. She kissed Daniel deeply and announced she was making a special dinner, his absolute favorite, egusi soup with pounded yam. You've been looking so tired, baby, she said, tying an apron around her waist. I want to take care of you tonight, a proper home-cooked meal, early to bed, and tomorrow you'll feel like a new man. Tomorrow you'll be dead, Daniel thought. While Clara was busy in the kitchen, Daniel casually walked past her purse on the living room table. It was slightly open, and he could see the top of a small medical vial with a blue label peeking out from the inside pocket. Michael had been telling the truth. Daniel's blood turned to ice. He retreated to the bedroom and pulled out his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely type. He needed help, real help, now. He called his older brother, Chitty, the only family member he trusted completely. Daniel, what's wrong? You sound terrible. Chitty, I need you to listen carefully and not interrupt, Daniel said, his voice low and urgent. Clara has been poisoning me for over a year. She's planning to kill me tonight. I have evidence, photos, recordings, everything. But I need you to do something for me right now. There was a long pause. Then, where are you? At home, with her. She can't know I'm suspicious. Get out of there, now. I can't, not yet. If I run, she'll know, and she might destroy the evidence or disappear. I need you to call the police and tell them to come to my apartment tonight at exactly 11 p.m. Tell them to be discreet. Park down the street, don't knock. I'll have the door unlocked. Tell them it's a matter of life and death. Daniel. Please, Chitty, trust me. I know what I'm doing. Another pause. Okay, but if you're not alive at 11 p.m., I'm coming in there myself. Deal. Daniel ended the call and took a deep breath. He had hours to survive. Hours to pretend everything was normal while the woman he'd married plotted his murder in the next room. Dinner was ready at 7 p.m. Clara had set the table beautifully, candles, wine, even flowers in a vase. She'd gone all out, creating the perfect last meal for a condemned man. "This looks amazing," Daniel said, sitting down. The egusi soup smelled incredible, rich with spices and palm oil. The pounded yam was perfectly smooth. Under any other circumstances, this would have been a beautiful evening. "Eat up, my love," Clara said, serving him a generous portion. "You need your strength." Daniel took his fork and pretended to eat enthusiastically, but every time Clara looked away or went to the kitchen for something, he scraped food into the napkin on his lap. When she refilled his wine, he accidentally knocked over the glass, spilling it across the table. "Oh no, I'm so clumsy," Daniel said, jumping up to help clean. In the chaos of cleaning, he managed to dump most of his food into the trash when Clara wasn't looking. "Are you feeling all right?" Clara asked, studying him carefully. "You barely ate anything." "I'm just not very hungry," Daniel said, rubbing his stomach. "Maybe I'm coming down with something." Concern flickered across Clara's face, the wrong kind of concern. She was worried her plan wasn't working. "You should rest," she said firmly. "Go lie down, I'll bring you your vitamins and some water." This was it, the moment of truth. Daniel nodded and went to the bedroom, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. He checked his phone. 8:47 p.m., just over 2 hours until the police arrived. He just had to survive 2 more hours. Clara came in carrying a glass of water and the pills. But she also carried something else, a syringe partially hidden behind her back. Daniel's breath caught. She wasn't even going to wait for him to fall asleep. She was doing it now. "Take your vitamins, baby," Clara said, her voice soft but with an edge of steel. Daniel took the pills and pretended to swallow them with water, palming them as he'd done before. "Good," Clara said. "Now just relax, close your eyes." She moved closer, and Daniel saw her hand shift behind her back, reaching for the syringe. This was it, the final moment. Daniel had 3 choices: fight, run, or trust that help was coming in time. He chose option 4. "I know what you're doing, Clara." She froze. "What?" "I know about the poison, the insurance policy, Michael, all of it." The color drained from Clara's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop lying," Daniel's voice cracked with emotion. "I've known for days. I've been pretending just like you've been pretending for 3 years. I have evidence. Photos of your murder notebook, recordings of your phone calls, the vials from your office. The police are coming, Clara, it's over." For a long moment, Clara just stared at him, her expression cycling through shock, fear, anger, and finally, something that looked almost like relief. Then she laughed. It was a broken, bitter sound that sent chills down Daniel's spine. "You have no idea," she said softly, tears beginning to stream down her face. "You have no idea what you've ruined." She sank onto the bed, the syringe falling from her hand onto the floor. "I loved you," Clara whispered. "In the beginning, I actually loved you. That wasn't part of the plan. I was supposed to marry you, kill you, take the money, and disappear. Simple, clean. But then you were so good, so kind, so trusting, and I started to love you, and that made everything so much harder." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "If you loved me, why didn't you stop?" "Because it was too late," Clara's voice rose desperately. "Michael and I had already started. The pills were already formulated. The plan was already in motion. And the debt—" She stopped, covering her face with her hands. "What debt?" "I owe money, Daniel. A lot of money, to very dangerous people. Medical school loans that got sold to loan sharks, gambling debts my brother accumulated that I had to cover, bad investments I made trying to get ahead. It all spiraled. They were going to kill me if I didn't pay them back. The insurance money was supposed to save my life. So you decided to end mine instead." Daniel felt tears burning in his own eyes now. "I didn't know what else to do," Clara sobbed. "And every day I gave you those pills, and every day I hated myself more. But I was in too deep. Michael kept pushing, the debt collectors kept threatening, and I couldn't find a way out." "You could have told me," Daniel said quietly. "I would have helped you. We could have figured something out together." I know, Clara whispered. That's what makes it so much worse. You would have helped me, because that's who you are, and I was willing to kill you anyway because I'm a coward and a monster. She looked up at him, her face wet with tears. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I need you to know. The woman you fell in love with, the one who loved you back, she was real. For a little while, she was real. The sound of car doors closing outside broke the moment. Clara heard it too. She looked toward the window, then back at Daniel. They're here, aren't they? The police. Daniel nodded. Clara stood slowly, wiped her tears, and straightened her spine. I deserve whatever's coming, she said quietly. But please, can you tell them about the debt collectors? They'll go after my mother if I don't pay. She has nothing to do with this. She doesn't even know what I've done. Before Daniel could respond, there was a firm knock at the door. Lagos police, open up. Clara walked to the door herself and opened it, her hands already raised in surrender. My name is Clara Okonkwo, she said calmly. I've been attempting to murder my husband through systematic poisoning. The evidence is in my office bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. I'll cooperate fully. The police officers looked momentarily stunned by her confession, but they recovered quickly, placing her in handcuffs and reading her rights. As they led her toward the door, Clara turned back to look at Daniel one last time. I really did love you, she said. I hope someday you can believe that. Then she was gone. The apartment felt impossibly empty after Clara was taken away. Daniel sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket the paramedics had given him, watching as forensic investigators photographed Clara's office, collected the vials and syringe, and documented everything in meticulous detail. His brother Chitty had arrived within minutes of the police, and he hadn't left Daniel's side since. I still can't believe it, Chitty kept saying, shaking his head. 3 years. She planned this for 3 years. Detective Amati, a stern-faced woman in her 40s, sat across from Daniel with a notepad. Mr. Okonkwo, I need you to walk me through everything one more time, from the beginning. So Daniel told her. About the pills, the strange symptoms, the night he pretended to sleep and discovered the truth. He showed her the photos on his phone, played the audio recordings, explained about Michael's warning phone call. We'll need to bring Michael in for questioning, Detective Amati said, making notes. He's an accomplice, even if he eventually tried to back out, but his cooperation could be valuable for the prosecution. What about the debt collectors Clara mentioned? Daniel asked. She said they'd go after her mother. We'll look into it, the detective promised. If these people exist and they're threatening civilians, that's a separate criminal investigation. Mrs. Okonkwo's mother will be protected. It was nearly 2 a.m. when the police finally finished and left, taking with them boxes of evidence that would seal Clara's fate. Chitty insisted Daniel come stay at his house. You can't sleep here tonight, not after everything. Daniel agreed. He couldn't bear to sleep in the bed he'd shared with a woman who'd been plotting his death. The next few days passed in a surreal blur. The lab results came back on Monday, confirming what Daniel already knew. The pills contained a custom-formulated cocktail of benzodiazepines and other sedatives designed to cause gradual organ damage while appearing to be merely strong sleep aids. Prolonged use at the dosage Clara had been administering would have led to liver and kidney failure within months, just as her notebook had predicted. The medical examiner who reviewed the case called Daniel personally. Mr. Okonkwo, you're incredibly lucky. If you'd continued taking these pills for another month, maybe 2, the damage might have been irreversible. You stopped just in time. Michael turned himself in on Tuesday, accompanied by a lawyer. He confessed to everything, formulating the pills, helping Clara plan the murder, even the affair that had started the whole conspiracy. But his lawyer argued for leniency based on his cooperation and eventual attempt to save Daniel's life. The prosecutor wasn't sympathetic. You poisoned a man for over a year and only grew a conscience when you realized you might actually succeed. That's not redemption. That's cowardice. Daniel was called to testify at the preliminary hearing. Seeing Clara in the courtroom, Wearing prison clothes and looking small and defeated stirred complicated emotions he wasn't ready to process. Their eyes met across the courtroom. She mouthed 2 words, "I'm sorry." Daniel looked away. The case made headlines across Lagos. Nurse plots husband's murder for insurance money. Husband outsmarts death. Daniel's phone wouldn't stop ringing. News stations wanted interviews. True crime podcasters wanted his story. Even a film producer reached out about buying the rights. Daniel declined them all. This wasn't entertainment. This was his life, his shattered, betrayed, nearly ended life. The only interview he agreed to was with a local domestic violence awareness organization. They wanted him to speak about the hidden dangers of intimate partner abuse, particularly the kind that happens quietly, invisibly, behind the mask of love and care. People think abuse is always visible, Daniel told the small audience gathered for the awareness event. Bruises, shouting, violence you can see and report, but what Clara did to me was abuse too. Systematic, calculated, deadly abuse disguised as devotion. He paused, gathering his thoughts. She convinced me to trust her completely, to never question what she gave me, what she told me, what she did when I was unconscious. And I trusted her because I loved her, because I thought marriage meant blind faith. But it doesn't. It shouldn't. A woman in the front row raised her hand. How did you recover? How do you trust anyone now? Daniel smiled sadly. I'm not sure I have recovered, and I don't know if I'll ever trust someone the way I trusted Clara, but I'm learning that trust doesn't mean surrendering your judgment. It doesn't mean ignoring warning signs or silencing the little voice in your head that says something's wrong. What would you tell someone who thinks their partner might be hurting them? Another person asked. Listen to your instincts, Daniel said firmly. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And don't be afraid to investigate, to question, to protect yourself, even if it means doubting someone you love. Because the person who truly loves you won't ask you to choose between your safety and their feelings. The audience applauded, but Daniel barely heard it. 3 months later, Clara's trial began. The prosecution laid out the case methodically. The marriage for money, the poison pills, the murder notebook, the insurance policy, the affair with Michael, the planned potassium chloride injection. The evidence was overwhelming. Clara's defense attorney tried to argue diminished capacity due to financial desperation and emotional distress, but it rang hollow against the cold, calculated nature of her planning. The most damning moment came when the prosecution presented Clara's notebook, specifically the page where she'd written, "Final solution if timeline inadequate, injection cardiac event simulation." These are not the words of someone acting impulsively out of desperation, the prosecutor argued. These are the words of someone who methodically planned to end a human life and had a backup plan ready if the first method didn't work fast enough. Clara took the stand in her own defense. She was composed, articulate, and brutally honest. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, looking directly at the jury. "What I did was inexcusable. I married a good man with the intention of killing him for money. I poisoned him every night for over a year. I watched him suffer and pretended to care. And yes, I fell in love with him along the way, but that doesn't make what I did any less monstrous." She turned to look at Daniel, who sat in the gallery with his brother. "Daniel, if you're listening, I meant what I said. I did love you. Not enough to stop, clearly. Not enough to choose your life over my own survival. But enough that every pill I gave you felt like I was poisoning myself too. That doesn't excuse anything. I just need you to know it wasn't all a lie." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and assault. The judge sentenced Clara to 25 years in prison, without the possibility of parole for 15 years. Michael, who had pleaded guilty and cooperated with the prosecution, received 12 years. As the bailiffs led Clara away, she looked back at Daniel one final time. He didn't look away this time. He met her gaze and nodded once, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that they'd shared something real, even if it had been poisoned from the start. acknowledgement that he'd survived and she would pay the price. Then she was gone, and Daniel could finally breathe. 6 months later, Daniel stood in his new apartment, a smaller place across town, far from the home he'd shared with Clara. He'd sold their old apartment and everything in it. Too many ghosts. He was healing, slowly. Therapy helped. So did time. So did the support of his family and the few friends who'd stuck by him through the media circus. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother. Still coming to dinner Sunday. The kids miss their uncle. Daniel smiled and typed back, wouldn't miss it. He was rebuilding his life, piece by piece. Learning to trust again, but cautiously. Learning to love again, but wisely. Learning that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about choosing to truly live after someone tried to take that choice away. The doorbell rang. Daniel opened it to find a delivery man holding a small package. Daniel Okonkwo. That's me. He signed for the package and brought it inside. No return address, but his name was written in familiar handwriting that made his stomach drop. Clara's handwriting. With shaking hands, Daniel opened the package. Inside was a single item, a journal, not the murder notebook the police had seized, but a different one, a personal diary. A note was tucked inside the front cover. Daniel, I'm not allowed to contact you directly, but my lawyer found a way to send this. It's my journal from the past 4 years. Everything I couldn't say out loud. Everything I felt but was too broken to act on. I don't expect you to read it. I don't expect it to change anything. But I needed you to have it. Because you deserve to know the whole truth. Not just the monster who poisoned you, but the woman who loved you and hated herself for what she was doing. I'll spend the rest of my life paying for my crimes, but I need you to spend the rest of yours being happy. Find someone who deserves you, build the family we should have had, live the life I tried to steal. I'm sorry will never be enough, but I'm sorry anyway. Clara. Daniel stared at the journal for a long time. Part of him wanted to throw it away, unopened. Part of him wanted to burn it and scatter the ashes. But a small part of him, the part that still remembered how she'd smiled on their wedding day, how she'd held his hand during his father's funeral, how she'd whispered, "I love you," in the darkness, that part wanted to understand. Not to forgive, never to forgive, but to understand. Daniel opened the journal to the first page. It was dated 4 years ago, 1 week after they'd met at the wedding. Met someone today, Daniel Okonkwo, not part of the plan, but maybe he could be. He seems kind, trusting, perfect. He flipped to a random page from a year ago, deep into their marriage. Gave him the pills again tonight. He smiled at me like I'm the best thing in his life. I wanted to tell him the truth, wanted to confess everything and beg for help. But Michael says we're in too deep, and the debt collectors called again. They threatened Mama. What choice do I have? Another entry, dated 2 months before Daniel discovered the truth. I think I hate Michael now. He keeps pushing me to increase the dosage to finish the job. But every time I look at Daniel, I see the life we could have had if I'd been a different person. If I'd been brave enough to tell him the truth from the beginning. He would have helped me. I know he would have. But now it's too late. We've come too far, and I'm not brave enough to stop. The last entry was written the night before Daniel faked taking the pills. Tomorrow I'm going to kill my husband. Michael says it's time. The injection is ready, and I'm out of reasons to delay. I love Daniel, I really do, but I love my own survival more. That's what makes me a monster, not the poison, the choice. I'm choosing to kill the man I love to save myself, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm so sorry. Daniel closed the journal and set it on the table. He sat there in his new apartment, in his new life, and let himself cry. Not for Clara, not for their marriage, not even for the love they'd shared that had been real for her, at least in her own broken way. He cried for the man he'd been before, the one who trusted completely, who loved without fear, who believed that marriage meant forever. That man was gone, poisoned just as surely as his body had been. But in his place was someone stronger, someone wiser, Someone who knew that survival meant more than just staying alive. It meant refusing to let someone else's darkness extinguish your light. Daniel stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the Lagos skyline glittering in the evening sun. He'd survived. And tomorrow, he'd wake up and choose to survive again. And the day after that. And every day after, for the rest of his life. Because that's what winners do. They survive. They heal. They choose to live. Daniel's story is a reminder that the greatest dangers often come disguised as love. Trust is beautiful, but blind trust can be deadly. Listen to your instincts. Pay attention to warning signs. And never, ever feel guilty for protecting yourself, even from someone you love. If you or someone you know is experiencing any form of abuse, physical, emotional, financial, or otherwise, please reach out for help. You deserve safety. You deserve truth. You deserve a love that doesn't cost you your life. What would you have done in Daniel's situation? Would you have confronted Clara earlier, waited for more evidence, gone straight to the police? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Sometimes the most important stories are the ones that make us uncomfortable, because they remind us that monsters don't always look like monsters. This is TJ's story, where we uncover the truth behind closed doors, expose the darkness hiding in plain sight, and remind you that your survival matters. Stay vigilant, trust wisely, and remember, the person you love should never be the person you fear. Until next time, stay safe out there.